Welcome to the Solution Nation podcast. My name is Sean Snowday, and I'm the president of Solution Nation. Solution Nation is dedicated to providing a platform for investors to learn about Israel's most dynamic public and private companies. We interview lead venture capitalists, Wall Street analysts, investment bankers, and managers of incubators and accelerators. Linda Štucbartová is an executive board member of the Czechia-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, responsible for science, research, and innovation. Linda was also nominated as Woman of the Year for bringing empowerment, self-defense to Czechia. Through her company Diversio, Linda mentored more than 1,000 leaders in developing innovation ecosystems. Don't miss this one-of-a-kind podcast that focuses on the special relationships that Israel and Czechia enjoy. These two nations helped each other with independence and embrace capitalism. Support for Israel permeates the Czech political landscapes, and Czechia votes along with or in support of Israel 99% of the time. Israeli technology is found in cars, on Czech roads, on Czech farms, and in mobile apps. Some of the things you may not know are how Israeli fintech and cybersecurity companies tap Czech programmers, how the nations host joint hackathons, how Czech and Israeli universities collaborate on foundational medical research, and how Israeli defense technologies are deployed in the Czech armed forces. The Israeli government has undertaken several initiatives to help Czechia foster its own innovation ecosystem, while Czechia often serves as the springboard for Israeli companies to reach the broader European market. Please remember that all content provided on the Solution Nation podcast and website is for educational purposes only. Nothing shall be construed as investment advice. Investment decisions shall not be made based on information, written, verbal, or otherwise, posted or spoken on Solution Nation. Conduct your own research or consult with your own investment advisors before making investment decisions. So here's my good friend, the host of the show, and the CEO of Solution Nation, David Wanatik.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Solution Nation. I'm David Wanatik. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about the Czech Republic's role in Israel's innovation ecosystem. Our guest today is Linda Štucbartová, who is an executive board member of the Czech-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, and she's responsible for science, research, and innovation. Linda Štucbartová was nominated as Woman of the Year for bringing empowerment, self-defense to the Czech Republic. Through her company, Diversio, Linda and her team have mentored more than 1,000 leaders in developing innovation ecosystems. In case I forget to say this at the end, if you'd like to learn more about Linda's work as an innovation expert, her website is Diversio, Diversio.cz, as in Czech. All right, Linda, thank you very much for joining us.
And David, it's my pleasure being here. My pleasure and honor to speak about a topic that is truly a passion of mine, and that is Israel and connection to Czechia. If you allow me, I'll use this short name, which is also the same in Hebrew, because my country has gone through some rebranding. And there is a lot to talk about, because Czechia is known as Israel's best ally in Europe. Certainly within the EU, my country and my government, either left or right, they one thing have in common, that they persistently advocate for Israel. Going back to history, I come from Prague. Many of our listeners know that it's the golden city, city of 1,000 spires, and it's also a city known for Czech, Jewish, and German presence. So the Czech, Jewish, and later German symbiosis has been there for a while. The founder of Czechoslovakia, Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, our first president, he went to Palestine in 1927 as the first European statesman. And at that time, he already advocated for the independence of the state for Jews. So there is a long history. We all know that Israeli War of Independence in 1948 was won by Czechoslovak arms, and thanks to the training of the army that my country provided. But let's also look into the future, because this is something I'm truly passionate about. And recently, last Monday, President of Israel, Mr. Herzog, visited Prague and gave our president, Zeman, a Presidential Medal of Honor, the highest Israeli award any foreign statesman could get. So I guess this gives us a brief introduction how tight and consistent basically the mutual relations are. Bibi Netanyahu once said that Israel has one friend, a very close one, on the Eastern Hemisphere, exactly mentioning Czechia, and the other friend is obviously the United States.
Oh, good. That's a very nice overview. So maybe starting with the history. So I read that the Czechia did supply Israel with a lot of weapons during Israel's War of Independence. I wasn't aware that Czechia also helped with training the burgeoning military forces in Israel.
Yes, actually, one of the first presidents of Israel was trained in a military base of Žatec. Other statesmen were trained in towns of České Budějovice. So there is a lot of history. And again, mentioning President Herzog's visit in Prague, the Czech Republic, it all started with meeting Shoah survivors. It was without journalists, but I was one of the luckiest person at that time because I could witness. And I could witness 5 Shoah survivors from Czechia meeting both presidents and telling them their stories. And again, it says something about the spirit, about the values we and Israel placed, and also the United States, on this issue of Holocaust and Shoah that we should never forget.
So the initial Israelis that were trained by the Czech military, were they trained by the Czech military because they were Czech by background, or did they travel from Palestine to Czechia to specifically be trained?
I wrote my dissertation in Oxford on Jewish displaced persons after World War II. So I can give you a whole lecture on this. Actually, there were people sent from then Palestine, to be trained. And then also there were survivors of Nazism that did not see future in Europe, so they went to be trained, and then they were joining Haganah, and then later on IDF. So both.
Okay, and then did Israel help Czechia when Czechia became more independent, when it became a freer country, more of a capitalist country?
It's very interesting question. And thank you for that, because what I don't like to talk about is that during the communist period, when Czechoslovakia lost its foreign sovereignty, basically for a time being, we had to cancel our ties with Israel because it was all run from Moscow and orchestrated from Moscow. And after the Velvet Revolution, after 1989, our president Václav Havel, in his New Year speech, after he was released from prison and elected as a president, he mentioned Israel as a strategic partner. And renewing Czechoslovak-Israeli ties was one of his priorities. And since then, for more than 30 years, as I said, Israel being strategic partner stayed and remain as a cornerstone of Czechoslovak and now Czech foreign policy after these two countries separated. But not only that, imagine that last week there was an article in Jerusalem Post mentioning event that took place this year in May when we were commemorating Israeli Independence Day, that for 2 days, the biggest island of Prague was, I would say, secured for events to get Czech people knowing Israel better. Israeli embassy here in Prague did an amazing job. More than 15,000 people came to learn about Israel, about the Hebrew language. I had there my empowerment self-defense workshop. There were Krav Maga workshops. There were cooking classes. There were super musical bands from Israel. Of course, there was shakshuka and so on, and 15,000 people. Can you imagine another European capital where this event could be held? No protests and so on, in peacefully. So this is such deep admiration of Czech people to Israel. And talking about Israel helping Czechia, I see it on many front lines. For example, during COVID-19, Israel was supplying us with vaccines because you know that Europe was a bit behind in buying vaccines, and due to some government issues, Czechia was really big behind. So we got the first dosage of vaccines for the most vulnerable segments for population from Israel. Me being responsible for science, research and innovation, I see so many bilateral cooperation going on. Also so many economical cooperation going on. So it's truly mutual.
Great. So those 15,000 people that attended the Israeli cultural events and so on, that's almost 4 times the Jewish population of Czechia, right? There's about 4,000 Jews in Czechia. Is that correct?
It's like, of course, because of the Nazism, because of Shoah, and then because of the communism, there is a big discrepancy between registered Jews and people who are of Jewish origin, but they just don't want to register because the mistrust to the government and to the authorities are quite high. So you are citing the official numbers. Mm-hmm. The unofficial numbers are about 15,000. At the same time, again, to tell you that Prague Jewish community is not only the old new synagogue dating back to 12th century, but it's a community that is Orthodox, but also progressive, because historically the Czech lands were lands of progressive Judaism. So right now we have a progressive community in Prague, in Liberec and in Děčín, this very young Rabbi David Maxa. And again, this community is growing. It's called Etz Chaim, so Tree of Life. And basically, it's getting attention. We get a lot of visitors. We get a lot of support. So okay. Is it back to the history? So is it back to the history or already a pathway to the future?
Okay, you use the word registered as being Jewish. Did you mean really register or identifying as being Jewish? In Czechia, do you have to register if you're Jewish?
Well, you don't have to, but of course, by belonging to certain community, for example, if you register, then you can vote for its representation and so on. So this, you were citing about 3,000 to 5,000 registered, and identifying it's more than 15,000. Okay.
So you mentioned that all the major political parties support Israel. Well, that's very nice to know. So there's not a big change in policy from Czechia to Israel if there's a change in government.
That's correct. That's one thing I'm truly proud of my country and my representation. And as I said, it's I would sort of call it a part of Czech DNA, because we know that Czech Jewish history dates for quite a long time, actually, ever since, you know, Prague was established. Then Jews came as the first traders and so on. So the Jewish element was always there. Remember the famous story of Golem, you know, again, medieval creature that fights the evil and so on. So it's part of almost Czech history. So that's one part. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned Germany a little bit. Germany has been very welcoming of immigrants. Has Czechia also opened its doors to a lot of immigrants, or not so much?
Right now, Czechia is per capita the most welcoming country for Ukrainian refugees. So again, something I am proud of. We have about 400,000 people coming from Ukraine. These are registered, so actually the numbers are a bit higher, and it's 10 million population. So it's quite a bit of quite a chunk of population that came and that we had to absorb. We did not have that much wave from, let's say, Islamic countries like Germany had from Syria and Afghanistan, because we are a Slavic country, you know, so these people don't have families there. There are no extended families. The Czech language is difficult. It's a country of 10 million. So to learn Slavic language, to adopt themselves, Germany was number one stop for them. Right now, for the same reason I mentioned, for Ukrainians, Czechia, together with Slovakia, Poland, and Romania, other border countries, is a destination country for Ukrainians.
Okay. And the Czech language is written in Latin letters, not
Yes.
Cyrillic letters, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So diplomatically, is there anything that you can point to as far as like the percent of time that Czechia votes with Israel in the UN, or collaboration on international government bodies such as the United Nations?
99%. 99, yeah.
Czechia and Israel vote together, 99%.
Exactly.
Wow.
And don't forget all the work Czechia is doing in the EU, because in the EU common and foreign security policy, it's often my country, when there are anti-Israeli tendencies, my country says, no, we will veto that. No, we need to voice it differently. No, Israel is our strategic partner. So is strategic partner of the European Union, actually. So we truly walk the talk, and I am very happy. Again, to mention some specific example, it was last year during the Gaza war, when our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kulhanek, now he's in charge of UN relations, went to Israel. And he went together with journalists to see how it is then when Tel Aviv and the big central area was targeted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe just a little bit about the Jewish community in Czechia. Do Jewish people get active in politics? Do they tend to be professionals, or are they active in certain industries? You know, I know it's a generality, but.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we have to consider is that both Holocaust, Shoah, and then the communism really did not help Jewish being identified as Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, Czechia is the most atheist country in Europe.
Okay.
It's also perhaps a reason why Czechs are tolerant, because religion actually does not play a big role in our life. Okay. And there was this big communist gap lasting more than 40 years. And before there was World War II. So when people are coming into politics, it's more for they then stand for rather than identifying themselves as Jewish. So people know that, but it's not the number one argument. What I can speak of is that very many Israelis come to Prague and they choose Prague as a place where to live, because Prague was recently voted as, I believe, number 4, number 6, depends on what chart, the most favorable city to live in. And also they establish their businesses. And it starts from real estate, hospitality, financing, investment, exactly your audience, but of course cybersecurity, and we are slightly moving to all areas of cooperation that the Czech-Israeli Mutual Chamber of Commerce is proud to promote. And I actually would like to challenge our listeners to write to me if they come up with an area that has not been developed. And if it has not been developed, then I'll help them. But from cybersecurity and defense cooperation, and Czech Republic, Czechia being a member of NATO, we actually bought some strategic defense system from Israel because simply they are the best. So cybersecurity, defense cooperation, I will not go into details. But then there is a fintech cooperation. Look at cars, Škoda Auto. You can find it everywhere in Israel. It's the most popular European brand, Škoda Auto, coming from Czechia.
Right.
That's a very emblematic cooperation because Škoda Auto has actually established its headquarters in Israel, in Tel Aviv. So there is Škoda Auto Digilab Tel Aviv. And they are scouting for the latest development in automotive industry. They are bringing them and testing them in Škoda. But because Škoda is a part of Volkswagen Group, global group of 12 brands, this is a unique opportunity for Israeli brands to get into the concern and to the global level.
Right.
So,
there seems to be so much support for Israel and Czechia that Czechia would still be the best friend of Israel in Europe, even if all the Czechian Jews were to make Aliyah. So just a couple of things. Is there a 1 hour time difference between Czechia and Israel?
yes.
Okay. And then how far away, what's the distance between Prague and Tel Aviv, and how frequently are there flights between the two cities?
So they are, I believe, now it's changed because of Corona, but there are several companies. It's not only El Al, but there are also some low-cost companies, and it goes from 2 times up to 4 times per day. So, it's truly a flight away.
Is it 4 hour flight?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then do the Czechian business professionals, do they speak English well enough to communicate with the Israelis? I imagine you speak English, right?
That's one thing all Israelis appreciate. And again, I need to give my country and my government credit for it. Imagine a country with 10 million inhabitants, and we have more than 70 universities and higher educational facilities. Okay. So the labor in the Czech Republic is still, compared to Israel, very cheap, but very skilled.
Right.
And looking at our history, where I can see big potential for collaboration, is I see Israelis as innovators, creators, communicators, while Czechia, historically, we were industrial lands. We are manufacturers. We are people more to the German side. So project-oriented, very much time-bound, very much structured. So here is the beauty of collaboration.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that Israel greatly appreciates the Czechian military buying some Israeli equipment. And we could say that, Czech is a small country and maybe it's not that big of an issue. But my understanding is NATO likes to somewhat standardize on equipment. And if Czechia is introducing some Israeli products to the broader NATO forces, that could be a tremendous win for some of the Israeli defense contractors.
Exactly. That's the logic, to get them tested in one country and then perhaps to scale it up. But this, what you mentioned, can be actually applied to any project. Imagine even Israeli or American businessmen coming to Prague, getting headquarters here, and then spreading elsewhere. And that's when I think of my country truly being a bridge between West and East, because we are in Central Europe.
Mm-hmm. Is it easy to do business in Czechia? Is it easy to establish a business? Is the rule of law strong and little corruption?
Some tough questions, but I am a businesswoman myself. So I see how it has improved a lot, okay? How our government is trying to attract more foreign investors. I see that we are trying to get people, even the officials, even the clerks, knowing a bit of English. I think Prague is truly comfortable city for expats. Could it be improved? Yes. The corruption, name one country that does not have a problem, and it's not a Scandinavian country, okay? The bureaucracy, always, it can be improved. But again, for example, the deputy prime minister responsible for regional development and also digitization, which falls onto this agenda, went in June to Cyber Week to Tel Aviv to get inspiration how we can move more towards e-government and e-society. So I see also plenty of opportunities there.
Okay. So with cybersecurity, maybe you can't get into too much detail, but my understanding is Checkpoint. This is not connected to Czechia, but Checkpoint, and the Israeli cybersecurity company, they have a presence in Prague. Is that correct? Okay.
There are many companies. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine there's a lot of great Czech programmers that Israel can contract with, or do the Israeli companies that use the Czech programmers, do they typically hire those people individually, or do they typically hire an agency or subcontract out some of their programming work to a Czech company that hires the people?
I think it depends. It truly depends. Very often what they do, they establish a branch here, and so on. Well, right now, I know there is a shortage of programmers in Israel. There is also a shortage of programmers in Czechia. So there are many incentives. I am responsible for the program Women in Tech, to promote more girls to go into technologies and coding, because that's the future.
Okay. Well, I'd imagine with the 400,000 people coming from the Ukraine, probably many of them are good programmers. Are you seeing that, or not? Not really.
The challenge is that right now we cannot tap into this potential because it's usually single mothers with several children fleeing, while their men stayed at home. So right now, what we are, and that's a societal problem, and perhaps Israel can again serve us as an example of successful immigration wave handling, is how we can tap into the potential. First, we need to have primary facilities caring for children ready. They need to be established, they need to feel secure, and only then women can return to work. Speaking of women, it's my area of expertise. My company being called the Diversio and Diversity. I think this is again something we can learn both from US and Israel, how to promote more diversity and how to promote more women.
Well, I think programming could be a profession that a lot of these single Ukrainian mothers pursue. First they have to be settled, and it's traumatic, and they have to care for their children and adjust to society, learn the language a little bit. But programming is something one can do at their home in the evening when the children go to sleep. So that it might be a very suitable profession for a lot of the Ukrainian mothers. So anyway, anything you want to say about cooperation with Israel on issues of water? I know there is a good bit of cooperation there.
It's water, it's agriculture, it's climate change, it's food sustainability. Right now, I don't know about the US, but all European continent is facing unprecedented heat wave. Like this week, and particularly today, it's just boiling hot, and it will be getting worse. So again, Israel is a country to turn to, not only with drip irrigation, but also with advanced farming, advanced use of different pesticides, and so on. So the whole cooperation in agriculture is, again, an area that plenty of things are happening.
Okay. So Czechia has 70 universities or institutes of higher learning. That's a lot. That must be more than Israel. And Israel's population is almost as big as Czechia's. Do you know roughly how many alliances there are between the universities of the different countries, or which fields they're cooperating in the most?
So basically, as I'm responsible for science, research, and innovation at the Czech-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, I know that plenty of interest is given to medicine.
Okay.
In the chamber, we have a special section that deals with e-health and the future of digital health and so on. And there are some partnerships between universities, between University of Moravia and universities in Israel. Actually, Israel facing a shortage of doctors, so Israeli students come and study medicine in Czechia, either in Prague and also in Olomouc. So that's one area of cooperation. Right now, I'm very glad that this year we launched a special project sending young leading Czech scientists to explore Israeli scientific ecosystem, but not only to learn about Israeli excellent research, but something we need to learn from Israel is commercialization. So how to turn primary research into applied research, and then how to commercialize it, how to create spin-offs, successful companies from these companies, how to grow them into unicorns, and so on. So right now we have a couple of Czech students. I'm very glad that these are 4 girls and 1 man in Israel, not only doing top research, because again, Czechia is known for top research, but also learning about this additional ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And so on. So that's another area. You mentioned agriculture, of course, cybersecurity. So basically, again, in many levels, there is bilateral cooperation. Israel is also part of Erasmus+, which is European Union program, and plus is that some countries are added to it, and one of the countries is Israel. Here comes the challenge. Israel is expensive. Okay, so for all this, I always need to secure funding so people go and get exposed to Israel, because with our current salaries and with what happened in Israel, especially with regards to rent, it is not easily accessible. I give you another figure. Before COVID-19, 200,000 Israelis were coming from Israel to Czechia, mostly to Prague. Only about 20,000 Czech people went to explore Israel. Mm-hmm. And again, the distance, of course, and the fact that it is very expensive was the number one reason. So right now we are trying to find some schemes when we'll be sending more young people getting exposed to Israel, young people attending hackathons, young people participating at this university exchange. Because I always say that past paves the way only to the future, but we always must work on relationships, bringing them and keeping them relevant.
Mm-hmm. And we should mention your daughter was one of the successful people in the hackathon, the recent hackathon with Czechia and Israel.
Right? Thank you very much. And as a prize, she got 1 year scholarship at Technion. But
that's amazing.
But what a difference this made for 20 people from all around the world, that they got together in Israel. They participated at opening of Maccabean Games. She actually sat not very far away from Joe Biden. Oh. They learned about Israel. They explored some very important sites. And then 2 days they spent on envisaging better world.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds like a great program, and congratulations on your daughter's success in the hackathon. Has Israeli government organizations such as the Innovation Authority, have they tried to teach the Czechian government about how Czechia can develop an innovation authority and how that authority can fund entrepreneurs and startup companies?
There are many, again, bilateral cooperation with their, I would say, partner bodies. So for us, it's Technological Agency, Academy of Science, and so on. And now we come to a point when we say, is Israeli ecosystem transferable? Like, can we establish what they have developed in Israel that's unique due to geostrategic position, due to the role Israeli army plays in the system? Or whether it is better to look at synergies and exactly at the outcome that you can get when you bring these, I would say, different types of personalities and perceptions together. So I'm very glad that as a part of President Herzog's visit, a Czech-Israeli think tank was established. This will be called Institute for National Strategies. It's a partner to Samuel Nieman Institute, and will be basically bringing the best experts from Israel and the best experts from Czechia working on issues both countries and actually the humanity is facing, such as post-COVID world, such as resilience, definitely future of climate, future of energy right now being number one topic, and so on. So we'll see.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you would like to discuss? Anything else you'd like to tell us about the Czechia-Israeli innovation ecosystem?
Well, I am a social entrepreneur. So I am very passionate for introducing social schemes and also, let's say, technical devices for people who are not 100%, let's say, perfectly fit, either physically or psychologically. So I know that there are very many technologies helping people with disabilities. My passion is empowerment, self-defense, which is again giving the vulnerable people ability to find their voice, find their confidence, learn how to protect themselves, and so on. The world, due to COVID-19, has gotten more violent, more dangerous, and as we say, the society scissors are widening. So let's figure out and let's work together how we can close this gap, how we can again collaborate and come closer. So that's my wish, and that's where I see that these bilateral high-level collaboration we have discussed can make a difference to each and every individual concerned on the ground.
Okay, maybe just one more question about Škoda, the Czech auto company. Is there testing in Czechia of auto technologies that come from Israel?
Yes.
Okay.
So the technologies they scout in Tel Aviv, if they prove that they should be, let's say, applied in a larger scale, then they bring them here and so on. But, there's so much collaboration, so perhaps we could have a sequel too, because let's talk about in the future about nanotechnologies, okay? Let's talk about ecological decontamination. Let's talk about Delta II program. That's a program exactly of applied research between Czech industries and Israeli industries that they can get together and create solutions beneficial for both nations and eventually beneficial globally.
I'm sorry, just one more question. You mentioned Germany as well. Is Czechia a pathway for an Israeli company to get into the larger market of Germany, maybe Austria?
I would say so, because European Union is a single market. So actually, once you enter it in one country, then it's easy to enter it in other countries. And imagine that's one thing, the aspect of security. And I have spoken to many businessmen, many diplomats. Would you dare to say you are a representative of Israel or of Israeli company to a cab driver in Belgium? Would you feel the same in France? No, you usually need to invent another identity. In Prague, they say, wow, interesting, Israel. It's a friend of Czechia.
Well, great. That's probably a good point to end the very interesting discussion. So, Linda, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And you spoke beautifully. You represented the Czech-Israeli alliance beautifully. So we really appreciate that. You opened up our eyes to very interesting things that most of us don't know about. Most of us don't know what a good friend Czechia is to Israel and how much cooperation there is between the two countries. So thank you very much for speaking to us.
So, David, it was my pleasure. And as we say in Hebrew, Hashana haba b'Yerushalayim or Hashana haba b'Prague. So next year, either in Jerusalem, if not in Jerusalem, then in Prague.
Or both. They're only 4 hours away. So great. And for those of you that would like to learn more about the cooperation, or for the Israeli executives that are listening to this session that would like to consider Czechia as a place to hire employees or to establish a subsidiary or a sister office, Linda Štucbartová is a great woman to speak with. And for those emerging leaders that need a little bit of mentoring, particularly women. I'm not sure if you also mentor men.
I do.
Okay, so we don't have to take men out of mentoring.
No,
okay.
no.
Okay.
But I say that I actively support women because this is the gender that needs to currently support more. But I work with.
But we can still leave men in mentoring. Okay. All right. So that's great. Yeah, Linda's company is Diversio. Diversio, and the website is diversio.cz. So feel free to contact her if you would benefit from some mentoring, which all of us could benefit from. All right. Thank you so much, Linda. Did you want to show us a report?
Yes, actually, I wrote a report on Czechia and Israeli relations, where I have some figures and details and so on. So it's in Czech, but it's easy to Google Translate. So if anyone is interested, just reach me out. There are more numbers, figures, details, specific companies, and so on. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Linda. It's a real pleasure to have you as a guest.
Okay. Thank you, David.